Welcome to Redline Global, home to 500 million people, representing the world's oldest civilizations. It is the birthplace of three of the world's most influential religions, whose 5 billion believers span all continents. It holds half of the world's energy reserves. Nearly 70% of global trade passes through or around its geography. Indeed, the Middle East and its borders define our future. Pakistan has acquired a new strategic centrality to the Middle Eastern affairs. It's a member of President Trump's Board of Peace. It is forming new alignments with Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. It has entered into a formal defense agreement with Saudi Arabia, one of its kind. And most recently, it is the centerpiece of efforts to mediate the conflict involving Iran, the Gulf states, and the US. These are unmistakable signs that the Middle East is changing. But what exactly is this new Middle East? In tonight's special edition of Redline Global, we will attempt to answer this critical question. As Donald Trump leaves for Beijing and tensions around the Strait of Hormuz stand on the verge of re-eruption, finding answer to this question has become absolutely vital. I have a great panel in my studio, but before I introduce my panelists, let me take you to Beirut, where my colleague, Leticia Castro, is there ready with the material focused on the Middle East.
Thank you, Talat, for the welcome. And of course, welcome to your audience to this episode 2 of our special transmission with Redline Global. I'm Leticia Castro with South Arrow Network, and we want to talk about this. For decades, the region followed a delicate balance. Iran leaned on its network of militias and allies, while Israel relied on military deterrence. Gulf nations bet on economic growth and stability, while the U.S. sat at the center, holding the system together. But the wars of 2025 and this year, 2026, are changing that entire balance. So what started in Gaza and Lebanon quickly grew into a much bigger regional crisis, one that pulled in states, militias, global power, shipping routes, energy markets, and millions of people far beyond the Middle East itself. So to understand how we got here, you need to understand the sequence of events that brought the world to this point. The United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed. Iran retaliated immediately and fired missiles and drones across the entire region. Within 24 hours, 6 American soldiers were dead from an Iranian drone strike in Kuwait. Iran then made its most devastating move, at least that's what many say, closing the Strait of Hormuz, and sending oil prices into free fall across global markets. Back in Tehran, a new supreme leader took power, the son of the man killed in those opening strikes. He showed no sign of backing down. Both sides eventually agreed to a ceasefire, a pause, but Washington almost immediately launched a naval blockade of Iranian ports, keeping the pressure, and now that ceasefire is hanging by a thread. President Donald Trump says it's on massive life support. Those are his words as of now. So what does this new Middle East actually look like? Let's take a look at an explainer that I recorded earlier today. For years, the Middle East operated under a kind of unwritten rulebook. Iran built its network of allies, Israel relied on deterrence, the Gulf states balanced security with business, and the United States remained the region's ultimate power broker. But the wars of 2025 and 2026 changed that entire equation. What had long been simmering in Gaza and southern Lebanon finally boiled over into something much bigger, a regional power struggle that reached from the Mediterranean to the Gulf. And by the time Iran and Israel were exchanging direct strikes, it was clear that the old security structure of the Middle East was beginning to crack. This wasn't just one war, it was multiple conflicts colliding at the same time. In Gaza, the humanitarian crisis deepened as the war between Israel and Hamas continued to escalate. In Lebanon, Hezbollah and Israel traded fire across the border, pushing the region to the edge of a wider war. Syria, a country already shattered by more than a decade of conflict, once again became a battleground for regional powers, militias, and foreign armies. And then came the biggest shift of all. Iran and Israel moved out of the shadows and into direct confrontation. For years, their conflict had mostly been indirect. Cyber attacks, assassinations, proxy groups, secret operations. These wars brought the region into a new era, one where missiles, drones, and airstrikes were no longer happening through middlemen. And that changed everything. The United States found itself pulled back into the center of the region, militarily and diplomatically. Washington worked to prevent a full regional collapse while also trying to protect shipping routes, energy flows, and its allies in the Gulf. Meanwhile, Israel shifted from fighting on single fronts to managing threats across multiple borders at once. The Arabian Gulf states, particularly the UAE and Saudi Arabia, faced their own dilemma. How do you maintain business ties, economic growth, and regional stability while missiles and drones move across the same region that your economy is depending on? And then there was Iran, isolated by sanctions, pressured by conflict, but still able to project power through its regional networks and strategic geography. But one of the biggest changes wasn't just about states, it was about who else was gaining power. For years, people talked about the Middle East through the language of countries, but these wars showed just how influential non-state actors have become. Hezbollah in Lebanon remained a central player, firing across the border with Israel while also trying to maintain its position inside a collapsing Lebanese economy. The Houthis in Yemen disrupted global shipping routes in the Red Sea, turning a local conflict into an international trade crisis. Iraq's Iran-aligned militias targeted U.S. assets and military bases. Hamas, despite massive losses in Gaza, continued to shape the regional security landscape. And in Syria, different armed groups, foreign powers, and militias continued operating on the same battlefields years after the war was supposed to have peaked. The result? The lines between war, politics, and geography started to blur. Suddenly, a drone fired by a non-state group could impact oil prices at a global level. An attack in the Red Sea could delay trade heading to South Asia. A missile fired in southern Lebanon could shake markets thousands of kilometers away. And that's why these wars matter far beyond the Middle East, because South Asia is deeply connected to this region through energy, trade, remittances, and migration. Millions of South Asians live and work across the Gulf countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. They depend on shipping routes that run through the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. So when the Middle East shifts, South Asia feels it too. Higher oil prices, pressure on trade, uncertainty for diaspora communities, new diplomatic balancing acts between the US, Iran, Israel, China, and the Gulf. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from the wars of 2025 and 2026. The old Middle East, the one built around clear alliances, strong states, and American security guarantees, is fading. What's replacing it is more fragmented, more connected, and far less predictable. The battlefields may be in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, or the Gulf, but the consequences now reach far beyond them. And as the region enters its next chapter, the question may no longer just be who controls the Middle East, but whether anyone can even manage the chaos.
Wonderful report. It sets the tone for our guests who are with us, and we would want to seek their insights and expertise to know what this new Middle East is all about. Khalid Almina from what this new Middle East is all about. Khalid Almina from Saudi Arabia, Saudi journalist, former editor-in-chief of Arab News and Saudi Gazette. Welcome to the show, Khalid. Dr. Kamran Bukhari from Washington. He's a geopolitical analyst. National security and foreign policy of the Middle East, South Asia, and Central Asia happen to be his area of expertise. Dr. Kamran, thank you very much. And we are also joined by Kathleen Dornbos from Washington, who's a New York Post foreign policy and national security reporter and has incredibly direct access to Donald Trump. All three very welcome to this Redline Global Special. Khalid Almina, if I could start from you, tell us, is there a new Middle East? If there is, what is it?
Well, there is, first of all, the term Middle East is a colonial settler term. It should be called the Arab world. There was the Middle East, the Far East, Ceto, Centro, and all that jargon that has been used. I think, yes, there is. Over the period of years, the deliberate attacks, the breaking of the state structure, the whole strata of society being moved. And one cannot also blame the West for it. And I'm not one of those who does that. But I think also it was the incompetence of many former Arab regimes, the revolutions that happened in the Arab world, the counter-revolutions, and the lack of a sustained economic development program in certain parts of the Arab world. As far as the Gulf states were concerned, the Gulf states were cushioned by, the abundance of wealth, and at the same time, they were a bit away from the main states that were being hit. Iraq was the closest. 2003, the unnecessary attack on Iraq by Bush, the murder of 1 million people or more. Then, of course, Syria, Libya, everything is now coming to light. The contrived incidents so that they will have an excuse to jump in. That is one. The other thing is, I don't think so. It is the Hamas-Israeli war. It is the Israeli extermination of any Palestinian aspiration for statehood. That is one. Secondly, the 70 or odd vetoes in the United Nations by America. So all these have contributed. Now, Iran is a bogeyman. I agree the Iranians have not been up to the promised standards of dealing with people. They have had many, and they've done a lot of, the shenanigans in the Middle East with proxy wars and all. But the attack again on Iran by these culprits, Netanyahu and Trump, was unnecessary, because Trump and Netanyahu, but Trump talks to the Arab leaders.
So Khalid Saab, what's your one-liner on this? Is it different from how it used to be, or is it a continuation of the same old problem culminating in different ways?
It will be very different, because if they don't rise up now and create a new strategy, then they will wallow in self-pity, and it will continue on till the day we all go away.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to make sense of it before that happens. Dr. Kamran, whether it is the Middle East or the Arab world, what makes it fundamentally different from how it was, say, like a year or year and a half ago?
Thank you, Talat. Look, a year and a half ago, Iran was dominant. Its proxies were intact. Its ingress into the Arab world, to use Khalid's term, was all too obvious. And a year later, Iran is in a very weak position. All of this is taking place amid a bigger strategic evolution, not just in the region, but the world. The United States is retrenching from the Eastern Hemisphere, from the Eurasian landmass, and of course, Africa. Its focus will be on the Western Pacific and the Indo-Pacific, the maritime space. So what the United States is doing under this president is rolling out a new geostrategy based on the concept of burden sharing and burden shifting. In other words, allied and regional partners in each region will take the primary responsibility for security and stability of their respective areas, while the United States will be playing a secondary role. What does that mean in the Middle East? Well, it means that if you look at the region, you have Turkey as an emerging power, especially in the light of the weakening of Iran. You have Saudi Arabia as an emerging power, and you can already see the cooperation between the two in the context of Syria, in the context of the Palestinian issue, and now we see it in the context of the war in Iran. So this is a brave new world out there, and I think that this requires taking off the old lenses and finding new ones to essentially make sense of what's going on.
It's a beautiful term, brave new world. But when you unpack, even though it may be a pernicious colonial legacy, Khalid can reflect on it, and yourself as well, Dr. Kamran, later on, you are also opening up Pandora's box. So it's not just the Middle East that is being redefined. You also have the outside powers like the Americans withdrawing, but at the same time looking at Venezuela and posting social media posts saying, I want you. So Khalid, is this a good thing that the colonial hangover is fading away? But what comes later and after is open to question. Do you have an answer to this question? What comes now?
What comes now is, I think, for nations to stand up, to take a bold stand and redefine their own strategy, not depend on foreign powers for protection, not depend for aid, countries are rich enough. The countries around us also have the visible means to do something. Pakistan is there, then you have the other Asian countries, if you want to include Uzbekistan and all that, they're quite near. I mean, the flying time is 2-3 hours from here. So I think, yes, if we rise up to the occasion, yes. Otherwise, as I said before, we are going to wallow in self-pity, blame the colonials and all. But one root cause of concern remains the Palestinian issue. And I'm not harping again and again. It is the central key to peace in the Middle East. Israel's behavior, atrocious, murderous, bloody, has to be curtailed. But unfortunately, they control the decision makers both on Capitol Hill and the White House. So I don't know how that's going to happen. You need somebody like Bernie Sanders or somebody else who will say enough is enough. Not to join the Arab camp, but at least to call a spade a spade.
Well, to change the Middle East, you need a change in the U.S. But let me go to another part of the U.S. from where Kathleen Dornbos is joining us. Kathleen, thank you very much. A simple question. I understand that you stay within the bounds of your discipline, which is reporting and access to information. So my question deals directly with that. When Donald Trump looks at the Middle East, based on your interface with the president and your reporting, what is he looking at? Is it a region that he wants to abandon to other powers? Is he there to direct its new shape? What's your take on President Trump's outlook on the Middle East?
That is an excellent question, and not one that I think enough people are really asking domestically within the United States. I don't think that Donald Trump wants to abandon the Middle East. While there has been a lot of rhetoric out of the White House from other members of the administration about the U.S. pulling back and leaving the international world, I still think that Donald Trump has an interest in maintaining the U.S. presence and acting as some sort of peace presence within the Middle East. But still, I mean, maybe not to the extent of some of his predecessors. I still think he wants to pull back. But again, you're going to have to deal with some kind of a vacuum once that happens. And so I do think that in the future, there is already some talk of what could a new system for even just looking at the Strait of Hormuz, what could that look like? Should we get more international partners in to help with that so that it's not just, American military boots on the ground being some kind of an arbiter of freedom or whatever the type of jargon the Americans typically use?
That's a wonderful start to my next question, Dr. Kamran. So how do you look at the shapers and drivers of the new Middle East? Khalid thinks that states have to stand up and speak for themselves, but at the same time there is this expectation that U.S. should do something about Israel. Kathleen is saying that U.S. is not really abandoning Middle East. It's a different approach altogether. So are we looking at the mix of regional factors, extra-regional factors, and global factors combining to shape the new Middle East?
Yeah, I think both Caitlin and Khalid are right in their own ways. Let me sort of pull this together, and if you allow me. Look, the last 70, 80 years can't be seen as the normal. The United States took upon this massive responsibility of playing, the net security provider for essentially the planet because of really atypical circumstances that it found itself in 1945 at the end of World War II. Europe and Asia were both devastated by war. 100 new countries emerged on the map of the world, and there was a rival superpower with its own political economic system competing with the United States. In those circumstances, the United States came up with a management system for the world, which includes institutions like the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, et cetera, everything that we've taken for granted for the last 70, 80 years. Now, that was not meant to be forever. And, especially after the end of the Cold War, multiple administrations, starting from Bush 41 onwards, have communicated to at least our European allies that, look, the appetite of the American people to support such massive undertaking, massive outlays, financial outlays, and this heavy lifting in military terms is not going to last. There will come a time when the United States will just not be in a position to continue to underwrite security in the world as it has. And therefore, you need to take up your share of the burden. This is an opportunity. I mean, for the longest time, the world has, complained. While it has, benefited and wanted America to take the lead, there's a paradox here. Yeah. People have also complained about America. So I think now is the chance. The United States is saying to regional players, well, this is your moment, step up.
Let me take this quickly to Khalid, because I'm really hard pressed for time. Khalid, who are the top three regional leaders of the Middle East? Or is it going to be one? Or is it going to be a group of states?
I think right now sanity prevails in Saudi Arabia and in Turkey. The other states have gone. Egypt is economically a bit weak. But I think if Saudi Arabia and Turkey do form, along with Pakistan on the other side of the Gulf, there will be some kind of semblance of strength. But one thing I took offense is when it was said that Mr. Trump is not in a position. We are not a bag of oranges that Trump will hand out or thing. I think again I stress the people of the region providing good leadership, KPIs, good governance will be able to ward off any of the evil that comes from the other side.
Caitlin, quick response from you. Go ahead.
I think that I think Dr. Cameron did a great job of synthesizing both. You have to remember that Donald Trump keeps saying, America first, America first, America first. That means that when he conducts his foreign policy, you see him doing things that benefit the United States. However, it doesn't mean America only, and I think that there is potential for partnerships. I think the idea also of the world expecting everything from America and yet also expecting nothing and expecting America not to do anything at all, we've got to find some kind of a balance in the middle there.
Thank you very much, all three of you. Great debate. Our Redline Global special coverage from Lahore and Beirut continues. We'll take a short break and come back to another dimension of the same issue. Welcome back to Redline Global special, being broadcast from Lahore and Beirut in collaboration with SEN. Let me take you to Beirut, where my colleague Leticia Castro is there to share with you a lot of content with regard to the Middle East and Middle Eastern related affairs. Over to you, Leticia.
Thank you, Talat. So we want to move into something that really strikes at the heart of regional economics and relationships. Pakistan has just returned $3.5 billion to the UAE. For decades, this was one of the most reliable partnerships in the region, built on trust, migration, trade, and crisis support. But this single transaction now raises a bigger question. Is this still the same alliance it once was, or is it becoming something more transactional? Saad Sohail breaks it down for us and how brotherhood is now possibly being rewritten as business.
Pakistan just paid back $3.5 billion to the UAE. On paper, that's a financial transaction. But in the context of how Pakistan and UAE have operated for decades, this one's worth paying attention to. For years, UAE deposits in Pakistan's central bank weren't really expected to leave. Every time Pakistan was in a rough patch, they'd simply get rolled over. But last week, this safety net was pulled away. No extensions, no delays. For decades, Pakistani labor helped build high-rise modern Dubai that we see today. The infrastructure, the skyline, the UAE that exists on the world stage. Today, around 1.7 million Pakistanis live and work there, making it one of the largest Pakistani overseas communities, contributing a major source of remittances back home. That's a connection that runs deep. But along with this continuity, there are signs of change. While there's no official visa ban announced by the UAE government, the Pakistani officials have acknowledged periods where it was harder to obtain visas. Even now, reports of stricter scrutiny, delays, and higher rejection rates continue to surface, despite that there is no official policy change publicly confirmed. In recent years, differences between Saudi Arabia and the UAE have become more visible, especially in Yemen, where tensions have escalated. A Saudi strike on a UAE-linked target and the withdrawal of Emirati forces highlighted the underlying mistrust between the two. For Pakistan, this matters. Pakistan reinforced its strategic ties with Saudi Arabia, including a mutual defense agreement in September 2025. Acknowledging the long-standing and close partnership. At the same time, UAE built global partnership, increasing economic engagements with India and normalizing relations with Israel following Abraham Accords. The divergence was also visible in the tensions involving Iran. When the Gulf became a battleground in the US-Iran war, UAE was on the forefront. There were over 2,000 projectiles detected in Emirati skies. Dubai airport was briefly closed, and UAE expected its partners to stand against Iranian threat. But Pakistan, managing a 900-kilometer border with Iran, sought to mediate. Individually, repayments, visa friction, and defense pacts might seem isolated incidents, but together they suggest a relationship that's entering a cold and conditional phase.
Thank you, Saad. And what really stands out here is that this is about far more than a single payment or a single diplomatic disagreement. From Gaza and Lebanon to the Gulf and South Asia, we're watching the rules of diplomacy, security, and regional power shift in real time. So what does this new landscape actually look like, and how much of it is being driven by war, economic pressure, and changing global alliances? Joining us now is Dr. Marwan Kabalan, International Relations Analyst and Policy Director at the Arab Center in Doha, Qatar, as well as Ruslan Trad, Non-Resident Fellow at the Atlantic Council's DFR Lab, joining us from Sofia. Great to have you both with us here at South Air Network, Redline Global. Thank you so much for your time. Let me start with this, with the big picture. After everything we've seen over the last 2 years, are we now entering a new era where relationships in the Middle East are less about ideology or historic alliances and more about security, survival, and somewhat of a strategic interest? Dr. Kabalan, let's start with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I believe that ideology is no longer playing a role in the politics of the Middle East as it used to be, let's say, in the 50s and 60s, when the Arab world and generally the greater Middle East actually was divided between the two great powers within the context of the Cold War. Today, every single country in the region is seeking its own interests. So the foreign policy of these countries right now is national interest or interest-driven foreign policy in which there can be shifting alliances all the time, temporary, sometimes coalitions. And that is how we can describe the current situation right now in the Middle East. Every single country, especially given the current situation, the war with Iran. Every single country in the region is seeking its own survival, is seeking its own national interest. So probably we'll be seeing a very different relationship today from what we saw in the past, and perhaps from what we are going to see in the near future as well.
Now, Ruslan, I want to ask you, have modern wars changed diplomacy itself, maybe shifting it from private negotiations to public battles over narratives and information?
Well, for sure. On the first place, we need to understand that the conflicts are no longer easy to resolve, and that is something the politicians are not willing to understand correctly. They are not listening to experts and even to the army and the general staff because the political agenda is totally different than what's happening on the ground. And the nature of the conflicts right now is changing, and therefore is changing the diplomatic solutions of, if any, solutions, because more generally, we have a problem with international law incomplete. That is one of the main problems we are facing as society, not only as countries. So for sure, the nature of conflicts is changing, and we are seeing this change in front of us, live on camera from Middle East and Ukraine. But not only, we have this changing of the warfare in Sudan, in the different parts of Africa, also in Asia. So the coming age of, or we are already in that age of the current technology. About drones, but not only robotics became more and more useful. And you see the Israeli army, how is using AI, for example, even deciding who will be killed on the ground. So this is something new and will be effectively important for diplomatic processes in general.
And I want to ask you, Dr. Marwan, are non-state actors like Hezbollah and the Houthis and regional militias now as important as states in shaping the entire region? What's your thought on that?
Of course, I mean, following the U.S. invasion of Iraq, we have seen this rise of non-state actors in the region. We are talking here not only about Hezbollah, Hamas, Iraqi militias and the Houthi movement in Yemen, but we are talking also about other actors like ISIS, for example, like Al Qaeda as well. But that period actually is now behind us, because today, especially after the September 11 attacks, especially after the Hamas attack on Israel on the October 7, 2023, we have seen the United States and Israel going after these non-state actors, trying to weaken them. And with the Trump administration, we have seen a shift in U.S. policy towards focusing on rebuilding the structure of the state. Before that, during the U.S. invasion of Iraq, we have seen the national state in the Arab world, in the region generally, weakening and becoming very fragile in the interest of the non-state actors. Today, we are seeing a completely different discourse in the sense that the United States, after seeing how these non-state actors have wreaked havoc across the region, that is trying actually to shift the focus by trying to help central governments in the region rebuild the state once again. We can see that, for example, today in Iraq, there is a huge pressure on the Iraqi government in order to dissolve and disarm the popular mobilization, Al-Hajj al-Sha'bi in Iraq. We can see that also in Syria, where the U.S. government actually completely abandoned its alliance with the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, in favor of the new Damascus government. So now we are seeing this shift actually from non-state actors into rebuilding a strong national state in which it can have full control and sovereignty over its territories, because, as I said before, it's becoming extremely difficult to tolerate the expanding power of the non-state actors. And now with the war with Iran, we believe that in the future we're probably going to see further weakening of these non-state actors, including Hezbollah, Houthis, the Iraqi militias, and other factions in the region.
Dr. Marwan Kabalan and Mr. Ruslan Trad, thank you both for a really insightful and timely conversation with us. What this discussion makes clear is that the wars of the last 2 years have definitely reshaped the area, at least borders and alliances. They've changed power, the way we see power, security, and even information itself, and how it now operates across the region and far beyond it. And of course, the consequences aren't limited to Middle East only. South Asia, Europe, and the wider global South are feeling the impact in different ways, whether it is through energy, trade, security, or public opinion. Let's now go over to you back in Pakistan, Talat.
Leticia, thank you very much. I was really tempted to put questions to Dr. Kaplan, and Ruslan also made some very important points, but I didn't want to interject because the discussion was unfolding in a beautiful way. I'm sure we'll have time for an interface across the two regions, but for now, let's close this part of the hour. Our transmission continues both from Lahore and Beirut.